Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a review for the 2021 Sanderson Farms Championship, where Sergio Garcia is your winner. First off, I want to apologize for not getting this video out sooner. I said I'd do it within the hour, and it's going to be almost 2 hours later from that moment. I create the thumbnails for all my videos, so that takes a little bit of time, and a lot of it's just, pasting the player in there with the trophy. But if you can tell, there's a lot of nooks and crannies. It took a little bit, and then I won't lie, I kind of lollygagged a little bit, so I apologize for this getting out a little bit late. But if you want to skip ahead any part of the video, I'll have timestamps in the description so you can go ahead and look at that. Let's go ahead, bring up the results page, and go through a little recap of this tournament. A lot of people were surprised with someone putting well with their eyes closed. Sergio deployed that tactic and won the tournament because of it. Here's the thing. Putting with your eyes closed is not foreign. Other PGA Tour pros have done it before, but have you tried it also? Here's why it can be beneficial to a lot of players. One is if you have great balance in your swing or in your putting stance, where when you rock the putter back and forward, you continuously hit the same spot over and over again. It's going to help. Like, you have to have good balance in order for this to work out. And really, that's pretty much the only thing. It's getting into a posture that allows your putting stroke to do the same thing over and over again. And if you do focus on your balance, closing your eyes isn't going to do anything terrible to your putting stroke. It actually helps you feel the putt a little bit more. So if you have speed issues on the greens, closing your eyes is going to help. I'd done it a long time ago, primarily because I can't remember who I had heard that was doing it on tour at that time. But I do remember, obviously you have to line up your putt, but as soon as you close your eyes and you swing back and forth, you only really worry about how far you're bringing the putter back and how fast you're striking through. And really, you should just let gravity do all the work, but it allows you to feel your putts much more. So someone like Sergio, if you'd watched him during the Safeway Open, he had a terrible time getting the speed of the greens. And that's probably his own issue, is he couldn't, either he couldn't commit to what he thought the speed was, or he had the yips, something along those lines. And really, you get the yips primarily because you're trying to peek at where the ball's going. So your head is going to, or your eyes are going to follow where the ball is going to go. Primarily, not so primarily, but that usually happens prior to striking the golf ball. So your head is kind of moving, your shoulders open, and when that happens, your putter face actually opens up when you hit it. It also can make your path to the ball differently. So closing your eyes, especially for Sergio, I mean, if you watch him again during the Safeway Open, he looked awful at putting. Not only did he not have speed control right, but he also just had put a lot of terrible putting strokes on it. So again, closing the eyes, not a huge deal. I know it might be surprising to some out there, but if you really haven't tried it, or you haven't really been paying attention to the tour, it's not crazy. And I would actually advise you to try it. You'll get the speed down pretty nice. So that's all I have to say about that. The tournament winner, Sergio, shot 19 under. That was the target score. And it's pretty easy. If you look at the last 5 years prior to this one, you see 18, 21, 19, 20. It averages out to be around 19 under. So we figured that was going to be the same here. The weather conditions were perfect. So I think as long as we know the weather is going to be perfect, we can expect these types of scores. I mean, the wind did blow here and there, but it really didn't affect these golfers. So seeing 19 under, that's no surprise. Peter Malnati shot a 63 in the final round to post 18 under, and he'd finished a good hour, maybe an hour and a half before Sergio or any of the other players. So he posted that score, and it was difficult for these guys to actually get there, which is kind of a little surprising, honestly, because it really didn't seem like the weather was that much different from afternoon to morning. But, I mean, again, Sergio did it. He actually won it on the last hole. Ended up birdieing hole number 18 by sticking a shot within 3 feet or 4 feet. And then obviously making the putt. I don't know if he had his eyes closed. I didn't see it, but I was paying attention to it on the shot tracker. So that's all we're going to talk about with the recap. I'm going to go ahead and get into the piece. I usually always come here to the 2021 recent form tab to talk about the optimal lineup versus the $1. Really, it's the GPP, the highest entry GPP tournament that I play in, whatever the winning score was for that. And this week, it was the $1 short game where the winning lineup scored 609 points. It consisted of Sergio Garcia, Keegan Bradley, Denny McCarthy, Stuart Sink, Rory Sabatini, and Sung J M. The optimal lineup, on the other hand, scored 700.5 points, 700.5, and that consisted of Sergio, Peter Malnati, JT Poston, Keegan Bradley, Henrik Norlander, and Christopher Ventura, which a lot of the Twitter world was on. That had an optimal, or that lineup cost $43,400. So you'd be leaving $6,600 on the table. That'd be pretty difficult to do. If we were to try to create like a typical lineup where we're trying to use close to all 50,000, it's pretty difficult. So we could obviously start with our 8K guys, but you can see there's no one here greater than 9K until we get to Corey Connors. So even at 9,200, it's not a good score for someone 92. I guess we could go like Sebastian Munoz, Peter Malnati. So this would be 49,600, and that's doable. What would the scores be? 636. So that would have taken it down, but it's nowhere close to the optimal lineup. It's more of a lineup that's closer to what we would expect to play. So it was more of a balanced build, but obviously having Peter Malnati at 6,300 doesn't so much make it a balanced build. But hey, having someone in the 6K range is always helpful. You can see this week, recent form coming into this tournament didn't matter all that much. If you watched any of the preview videos that I did, the course fit, stat fit, or the strategy video, really we weren't looking for, the best recent form coming into this tournament. It just ended up, any recent form, as long as it wasn't like the worst, like Aaron Wise down here, although he scored a lot of DraftKings points. It just wasn't something, recent form just wasn't that important heading into this tournament. Heading to the 2021 DK page, I had gotten a question on Twitter about, how the buckets work and how much success have we found with the buckets. The buckets usually end up pulling through every week. I don't remember the percentage. I do remember when I first created a video, I think the success rate was somewhere around like 85 to 90%, somewhere in there. And I mean, if you've been with me for a while, you know that although the bucket system works, it doesn't mean you can actually create a lineup with the winning bucket score. If you were to have, if I were to tell you needed 2 or 3 last year ones, if these guys were like $11,000, 2 of these guys were $11,000, it's not going to be doable to make the optimal lineup with, following the bucket system. So although the bucket system works, sometimes it's not feasible to make a lineup. So I just want to be upfront with you guys. But talking about the bucket system, obviously I told you last year ones, the lower the score, the better, or the higher likelihood of them doing, well, let's put it this way. The lower this number is, the more you would want to play them. So I already said, we want to find last year ones or any combination of last week ones with whatever the last year score was. The only oddball here would be Peter Malnati. A 5.5 isn't a very good score, but any combination of a last year 5 or even a last week 5 still gave you points, and that's what the points over on this side represent. So if you were to see a 0, that means I'd be like usually dead in the water. But seeing 9.17, it's pretty low. And a lot of it has to do with, I don't think he got any points from the last week's score, but he got some from the last year's score. But I don't really want you to focus on that last year 5. I do want you to focus on how few of last year 5s are in the top 10. There are not many. And then also with that, there's no last year 6s up here. I mean, you can kind of see one guy right here, Chase Seifert. He finished inside the top 20, but you don't see him inside the top 10. And we'll go through each bucket so you guys can see, which players, again, this was in my strategy video, but you can tell which players, or you can see which players were in those buckets and why you would want to fade them. In that strategy video, I pointed out the 3-1s. The 3-1s were probably the best group, or it's so much, I wouldn't even so much say 3-1s, just the last year 3s. Before we actually get into that breakdown, I do just want to show you. So we have 3 last year 1s inside the top 10. That obviously matches the other bucket, last year bucket of last year 4s inside the top 10. So there were 3 apiece. And this is why the bucket system is pretty good, because it tells you how comfortable you should feel playing a certain bucket. So obviously you wouldn't want to play, 6 last year 4s, because where's the next last year 4? Down here, Shank and Grillo. Having a lineup like that would have made you some money, but it wasn't the best lineup, right? So having 4 of these last year 4s might be helpful, but you wouldn't have wanted to play 6 last year 4s. And maybe it was never in your mind to play all these golfers together, but even if you did, or even if somehow your system got on these players, looking at the bucket system and going, oh, dear Lord, I don't want to play 6 last year 4s. That's what the bucket system helps you do. There were no more than 3 of one last year bucket inside the top 10. But the lowest scores, so last year 2 showed up twice. A last year 3 showed up twice. Those are really close. To see 3 last year 4s doesn't really excite me or disappoint me in any way. There's likelihoods we're going to see, maybe we would have saw 2 last year 5s, and say we take away one of these last year 1s. Still doesn't, seeing a last year 1 with Sergio with another last year 1 in Keegan, those are 2 things that are, you can't take those away. So even if we were to see another last year 5 up there, you still wanted to play at least 2 last year 1s. So, that in itself is why I like to look at the bucket system. So let's go ahead and look at each bucket. I'm going to first actually go by salary, and then we'll go last year 1s, or last week 1s, and then last year 1s. So here are the buckets, and going by salary, you can see, sure, you see a bunch of different colors here. And I did this by salary first because I want you to see the players that are up here. Actually, I should do it just by salary and not really look at the last week. Okay, so Will Zalatoris was a 1-2. Now, Will Zalatoris wasn't anyone on my radar. I didn't like the group that he was in, where he was playing, but either way, Zalatoris wasn't someone that I actively was on. I did play some of him, but I didn't play a lot. Likewise, I didn't care for Ches Reavie. I can't even tell you I played a bunch of Sergio, but when you look at the 1s up here, you have to determine who are your favorite plays. And really, Zalatoris wasn't, Reavie wasn't, and Stenson wasn't. I did like Garcia, Perez, Lewis. I did like Sabatini. He just worked out my lineups for some reason, so that's why I was on him. And I really liked Taylor Gooch. So those were only a few names that I actually looked for these last year 1s, but you can see you want to pick your favorite. You should start with your favorites and build around them. And I guess out of the last year 1s, mine would have been Sergio. When we come down to the last year 2s, your top guy was Corey Connors. Now, I didn't really like the last year 2s all that much. When we look at the players that are within this last year 2, I I liked Will Gordon. I did play some Corey Connors, but I really didn't play any of the rest of these guys. In fact, I do want to show you, so I'm not just blowing smoke. Oh, I opened the wrong one. Let me zoom in and let me put a filter on this. Okay. I do not like how this looks. It really doesn't matter, honestly. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the WDs out of there. I don't really update this spreadsheet to match the other one completely. But here, because this is more of just me tracking, you know, how much I'm playing somebody and really putting together the whole spreadsheet. So you can see Tom Lewis, I played 40 times, but you can see the rest of the guys that I played that I was on. Played Sergio in 18 of my lineups, which I guess you can't see the percentage, which is annoying. Oh, it's hidden. Whoops. Well, that's unfortunate. Either way, you can see all my ownership up here. So I was obviously on a lot of last week ones. I did like Denny McCarthy. I was on him 26 for 26 lineups. You can see Gooch, Gordon, Scheffler, Garcia. So these are all the guys. I even told you I played a lot of Rory Sabatini. There's Corey Connors. So Corey Connors and Will Gordon were my highest owned top last year twos. And that's where I was getting at with this. And I mean, Gordon did make the cut. So did Corey Connors. Neither one of them did well enough to really want to put in a lineup. So either way, that's how it goes with last year twos. But to me, there weren't a lot of good last year twos. The big bucket was when we came down to the last year threes, determining, like, look at how many favorites there were. How many guys were 9K and above? To me, that was an issue. I didn't want to play any one of these guys in multiple lineups. And if I did, I limited myself in how much I did. There are several things with like bucket combinations that you want to go over or consider, I should say. So playing a 3-1 several times, if I were to go and look at the combinations here, as I do in all of my strategy videos, you know, we see it once, but we really don't see it that many more times. So there, you know, if we use this as a percentage of how many years over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 1 to 6 is like 16%. Like, we don't want to play it more than that. So when we look at ownership and who we want to own, if you were to take that strategy and, you know, employ it, depending on what your strategy was, I should say deploy it, you could have easily stayed away from trouble when it came to, you know, pairing like a Scotty Scheffler with a Sung Jae, or even Scotty with Byung Hun An, or any of these guys. If you would have avoided pairing any of them together, you were probably better off doing that. And that's why the bucket system, again, that's why it helps. So Denny McCarthy, JT Poston, maybe your two best value plays in the last year threes, or the last year three or the last year three bucket. And that's why I would have went with them. Coming down to the last year 4 bucket, we did actually see quite a bit inside the top 20. Like, this is a good chunk of players inside the top 20. Now, coincidentally, they're all 4-1s, except for Charlie Hoffman. I shouldn't even so much say coincidentally. Last week ones were a very high bucket, but I also explained why they were. So go to the DFS strategy video and find out why that was. I don't want to spend a lot of time here. But even though this was a week that wasn't like, or this was a tournament, this was Sanderson Farms, unlike other Sanderson Farms, still matched last year's Sanderson Farms, like, the same tournaments prior to. But still, the last week ones were more. It was more advantageous to play them as opposed to the rest of them. So you can see a lot of players up here. So if you were, maybe you weren't on Adam Long, but when you look at this, you see he's a 4-2. Just last year 4s have a better likelihood of finishing inside the top 10 than, say, last year 3s, 2s, or 1s. But certainly didn't want to ignore this bucket whatsoever. And hopefully that would have got you on Cam Davis. To me, was my favorite last year 4. But you could have pivoted to, say, Charlie Hoffman and would have done it pretty much exactly the same. Now, Cameron Davis scored more points than Charlie Hoffman, but either way, you get what I'm getting, or you get my point. I don't really care to talk about any of the other last year 4s, but if you were going in the 6K range, you had 2 guys that you could have chosen from that would have done pretty decent. So coming down to last year 5s, I had said in my strategy video, it probably wouldn't be advantageous to play Sam Burns with Doc Redman. And a lot of it to me comes down to the bucket. Sure, we see Peter Malnati and Brant Snedeker. They both were doing well, but for the majority here, when you have a high price guy like Sam Burns or Doc Redman coming to the bucket system and seeing that the last year 5s should give you a little pause or a little concern, and maybe that's why you don't play one or the other. I certainly said don't play them both, but if you were to choose between the two, you can either split that ownership up or go all in on one of them. I did that with Doc Redman. I played much more Doc Redman than I did Sam Burns. So you can see Doc Redman 31 lineups, Sam Burns in 2. So this is me deploying my own strategy, and it was a good week for me this week. So it worked out quite a bit. Now coming down to the last year's 6s, so you can see there were only 3 golfers, and I even told you Chase Seifert was out of it. It was between Siwoo Kim and Patrick Rogers. That's what happens with the bucket system. Even though, Siwoo had the best score, and again, that's mostly because he was a last week 1. I thought it was between Siwoo and Patrick, but Chase Seifert wasn't someone you just play 0 of. If you're going to play him in 100 lineups, maybe you just play him in 1. And if you were to do that, it didn't turn out terrible. Now, he didn't finish inside the top 10, so this doesn't count for me. You're not going to see him, my buckets aren't going to go up for a 6-5. So Chase Seifert will be forgotten, when it comes to the buckets. But I did warn you not to play many last year's 6s. And therefore, if you follow the bucket system, this was the reason. So either way, bucket system worked out pretty nicely. We can see how many 1s there are within the top 20. There are 5. And how many, last year 2s were there? There were 5. How about last year 4s? There were 5. Only 2 last year 3s, which is kind of surprising, but we did have some down here that finished 23rd. They're 1 shot off of finishing inside the top 20. Certainly could have done it, but obviously did not. But just going with the bucket system, you see so many more 1s and 2s than you do, or 1s, 2s, 3s. I shouldn't even say 3s. You see 1, 2s, and 4s. Much more than 5s and 6s. Now the buckets for 5 and 6, or the pools that were within 5s and 6s, not very large. But either way, bucket system would have got you on a decent amount of players. So with all that said, we went through all the buckets. I'm going to quickly go through the other things that I cared about. Obviously, I color code these. If you're with me in my strategy video, you know what this means. So if there was a group that I liked, I highlighted them. Yellow was more of a cautionary color. It was well, they show up, with scoring averages and stuff like that. But I'm not sure how I feel about them. That's what the yellows mean. So you can see even Denny McCarthy was yellow. I liked McCarthy. I liked Ventura. I didn't like the group he was in. Same with Norlander. That's what these reds mean. The reds mean I liked their group, or I liked the player. I didn't like the group that they were in. So you can see Sergio being a 37. I think he was with Henrik Stenson and somebody else. Obviously didn't make the cut, but You can see how many color codes there were up here that finished inside the top 20, inside the top 10. And a lot of this comes from, let me go ahead. Let me go ahead and do this so we can talk about some of these players. Let's hide this. We don't really need to see that. We can just see the players. Or should we actually do it the other way around? Sure. All right, so we'll hide it like that. We can see salary. We can see DK points. Oh no. Dang it. Don't mind the course history. I just forgot to update. Yeah, that stinks. I'm gonna have to change all of these. It's so annoying. Actually, why don't I just do it right now? It's not gonna be difficult, but it is annoying nonetheless. There you go. Of course, it's gonna do that too. But that's not right, is it? Peter Malnati got a 40. Oh yeah, probably. Okay. Sorry about this. Gotta always copy and paste just values only whenever you get the opportunity. Otherwise, you're stuck doing this. There we go. All fixed. Let me just double check to make sure it's absolutely right. 65.33, 36.75. Yep, okay. So either way, the this score here, which I can hide this because I'm not going to talk about odds. Really don't have to talk about any of this. The scores here are golfers who had a good scoring. I shouldn't say the scores here, but the highlighted golfers or tee times here have a lot to do with their scoring average. So if they had a scoring average that was under the field average, which was 71.15, I typically highlighted them. And you can see a lot of these golfers were under that. They were under that scoring average. Surprised that I didn't actually highlight Cameron Davis. I must have forgotten or didn't see one of the two. But he was a golfer that I absolutely did like. But yeah, I use a lot of the scoring average pieces here. I'm going to go ahead and hide this. The other thing that I looked at were the rounds under 70. So the percent of their rounds under 70 was a huge one. And I actually used this during Showdown. And I was up this week with Showdown. So I put in $4.40 and came away with, I think it was like $5.50. So obviously not a huge profit. I'm not putting a lot of money into the Showdowns just yet. I'm just kind of getting a hang of it. But I use the amount of rounds that they typically shoot under 70. If they make the cut and say, they haven't, say they shoot a 70 and then a 69 and they make the cut and then they shoot par, more than likely that fourth round is going to be under 70. And it's crazy how much that works. So I'm excited to explore that going forward. But I also highlighted a lot of these golfers based off of how often they shoot under 70. Wesley Bryan was one of my favorite plays because this right here is amazing how often he does it. If I were to look at this and we look at Wesley Bryan, 3 rounds under 70, and this was a par 72. So that 68% just goes up more. It goes up to 70%. Well, I shouldn't say it does, but it might. It could go up to 70% or just gets closer to 70. But that's what I use these numbers for. Now, Sergio having 4 rounds in the 60s, he hasn't done that lately. I mean, 29%, the likelihood of him shooting under 70, obviously did 100% of his rounds this week. But, looking at the rest of these golfers, Peter Malnati, 2 rounds of 70, a lot of these numbers here bake in their missed cuts. So obviously if they do have a bad tournament where they're not shooting under 70, they only play 2 rounds, and unfortunately this number is based off of 4 rounds. So if PGA shows me that there's an event, I just multiply it by 4 regardless if they make the cut or not. So these numbers could be better. It just shows you how much better, you know, like Wesley Bryan's is. I'm not going to stay on this for too long, but if you were with me in the strategy video, and if you continue to follow me during the strategy videos, you're going to see those are things I look at when it comes to tee time pairings and stuff like that. So for me, it worked out this week. And again, I'm excited to explore it going forward. So let's go ahead and quickly go through Bermuda stats. All I want you guys to do is pay attention to this column over here, the results. So you can see Sergio 1 had the 4th best Bermuda. Just take a look at how many missed cuts there are. Those would be the 85s here, and how many top 20s, anything that is highlighted in green. And just go through. Looks like Bermuda did matter. You know, our top Bermuda stats, you know, top 10 percentage, not so much. The 2020 Bermuda scores, you know, we have 5 in there, just like we did before. Overall, though, when we look at this, we can see, you know, I guess minus Tyler McCumber and Christopher Ventura, everything had a positive percentage. And obviously it's going to, but what I'm saying, it's above 0. You know, Peter Malnati, 3.6% time inside the top 10. That's out of 55 events. You know, I'm not saying he does it a lot, but he has the capability of doing it, and that's what this number shows. So, you know, we could probably look at this number in the future when we see these zeros, and then we also see how many events that they've played, you know, 6 and 4, you know, that's pretty crazy, you know. I shouldn't say crazy. That makes sense. That's logical is what I was trying to get at. When you play this less amount of events, I don't know how to say that properly. When you play that limited amount of events, having 0% isn't crazy. Now these numbers will go up. Obviously this will turn to a 5, and now Christopher Ventura goes to 20%. Which ends up being pretty high in this field. McCumber will go from 7 Bermuda events, and then his top 10 percentage is probably going to be, 14%? I think it ends up being. So, like, that's still going to be good, too. So, when we look at 0% and we don't see many Bermuda events, we can pretty much scratch that off and say it's okay to play them in a couple lineups. But for the most part, a good solid amount of Bermuda events within this field. Inside the top 10, that is, and then a good percentage, you know, good Bermuda percentage there. I'm going to go through the strokes gained just like I did with the rest of the stats. I'm going to let you guys just, you know, pay attention to the column over here under results. So tee to green, we had 5 golfers inside the top 20. Off the tee, we had 3 golfers inside the top 20. Approach, we had 4. And I should mention this. Pause the video if you want a better look at this, and then also screenshot it if you want. Around the green, we had 3, including Sergio Garcia. Putting, it's crazy to see how much putters there are. You know, this is a quote-unquote putting paradise, or whatever Brandt Snedeker said, a putting contest. Well, some of the best putters did well at this tournament. There's one name, pretty obvious name that's not on there, and that's Sergio Garcia. Green and reg, I don't really look at green and reg all that often, but you can see 5 guys that were, you know, top in green and reg finished pretty decent. Proximity, we want to go the other way. None of our proximity guys, that did not matter whatsoever. Birdie or better, look at this. Wow, 4 golfers right there within the top 6 in that stat finished inside the top 10, and actually finished inside the top 6. The top 6 of them, I'm just kidding. And a few other guys down here. So birdie or better, not a terrible one to look at. I guess we could probably hide that. That's not a big deal. Did driving distance matter? We had 4 guys inside the top 6. A lot of guys who missed the cut, obviously, you saw that. And driving accuracy? Nah. How about good drive percentage? 4. And good drive percentage is just golfers who make the right decision off the tee, essentially. That's what that stat means. And bogey avoidance, not a huge one to go over, not a huge one to look at. So that was the stat breakdown. I mean, that's everything that I cover in my other videos. The only other thing I didn't was course fit. And at this moment, I don't have, you know, a column to show you what shot shape they hit. But I had said that this week didn't really matter. There were even amount of holes that we wanted it draws into. There were even amount of holes, like the same amount of holes that we wanted it fades into. And there were a bunch of holes where it didn't matter. And in that scenario where it does not matter, we prefer golfers who it fades. And I do know Sergio primarily hits a fade. Now he works the ball. He can hit it both ways. So it actually, you know, when we think of it that way, it even further shows that Sergio would be a better fit at this golf course. And a lot of these other golfers, I really don't know off the top of my head what shot shape they hit. So if you guys do know, or if you guys do the strategy, I would venture to say most of these guys hit fades. I do know Keegan hits a draw, hits a very high draw, so it's something that he can control and get really close to tucked pins no matter where they are. But either way, I can't really show you the course fit part of it, not yet at least, but I shouldn't say I can't show you. I mean, course history is one of the things I talk about with course fit. Shot shape is just one of the other things. So either way, top 10 stats was another thing we looked at during these videos. And I mean, we didn't really see anything that was crazy. You know, Doc Redman had the most top 20 stats in the field. You can see how everyone else did. Sergio was the guy who ended up winning this tournament, obviously. He had 5. So Sergio was the 8th best golfer in the field. We're tied for 8th with the most amount of top 20 stats. So really, I guess looking at the top 20 stats didn't really matter, you know, heading into this tournament. That's where I like to, you know, toot my own horn and say the bucket system is a good way to pick your players. But I don't have anything else that I can think about talking about, so I'm going to leave the video at that. 37 minutes, not terrible. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in a preview for, what is the next tournament? The Shriners Hospital Open. All right, see you later.